Okay. Can everybody see the screen? I want to make sure that I shared it appropriately.
Yes.
So it should say Grant 101 and Patricia Tish Williams. There'll be some contact information at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to call me Tish. If you call me Patricia, she's my evil twin, so we don't really want to meet her. We're going to go through some things today that will be just the beginnings of grantsmanship. Oftentimes when we have, especially in areas where we are jacks of all trades, we find that we get reassigned new things. And so I particularly like this cartoon that, the mazes were getting really easy, so now we have to have them running through bureaucracies looking for grants. Oftentimes people think, well, a grant is an easy thing to do, just go get us some free money, which is not necessarily true. So I just wanted to go over kind of what is a grant. By definition, a grant is a contract between a donor and an organization. The donor is going to give you money for specific types of activities, and all of these types of activities are going to be laid out in your grants application. And so you want to think about a grant as being something that's going to get you to an end result. Oftentimes people think that we're going to get a grant so we can hire a position. But grants are not a long-term solution to anything. They have a start date and an end date. And even if somebody has had a grant for a number of years, there's no guarantee at the end date that it's going to continue. So you always want to make sure that you have a sustainability plan, or you have a way that you can continue the work of the grant beyond the prescribed times that are agreed upon when you put it in your application. I'm going to ask Lisa to do a quick survey on your experience in grantsmanship.
All right, we see responses coming in.
And I put mine in, so hopefully I'm the only one with lots of experience.
Great, we're just gonna, looks like most people have. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share those results.
Excellent. So we have a couple of people who've not done any grants whatsoever. We have some that are in that mid-range that they've done one or two, so you're probably here to expand on those skills. And there's a few of us that have more than 3 years of experience with, or more than 3 applications with grants. Thank you. So I kind of know my audience and where we speak and where we might speak of. I like to start off these kinds of presentations with the very basics of what do you really need from the grant. And a lot of times people say, well, I need a grant to buy a new widget for my office. But that really is more of a want. You want the widget in your office. What's the real need? What's that widget going to do? Needs or problems for a grant are different from what your need is. It's the need for the greater good. So you need the widget because your students can't engage in this. So that becomes what the real need is. The need is for the student engagement, not for the widget itself. If a need is left unfulfilled, what's going to be the detrimental impact? What happens if we don't get the widget? That helps you identify what that basic need or problem is going to be, and that's what you're going to write your grant about. A lot of times people think that their need is going to be short-term, but oftentimes these are longer-term problems. A lot of questions I get sometimes are, how do you approach a needs statement when you're doing a research grant? So if you're helping somebody on a research grant, how do you know how to write a needs statement? What I turn it around is if that research isn't done, what will happen? Think about it in those terms. And you want to look for what are the underlying causes for that need or problem. Is it something that you have regionally? Is it something nationally? Is it within your own institution? What is the underlying cause of why this is a problem? A strong needs statement is going to be able to be the basis of the foundation or the largest portion of what your grant application is going to be. I always advise people to spend the most time on what the need statement or the need problem is. You want to make sure that you research it fully and are able to grasp how that is, because your ability to communicate that is going to impact all the rest of your application. It will oftentimes help you find your funding source, and we'll get into that a little bit later. It will help gain the reviewer's attention. If you can grab their attention with what your needs statement is, even if you reduce it to one sentence, it will grab their attention and make them want to read the rest of your application. How many of you have started to read a paper of a student and they lose you in the first paragraph? That's not a survey question, it's just something for you to think about. But if you can put it in that perspective, you want to make sure that this is the first thing that they're going to see, that you grab them. You want to make sure that from your clear, strong problem statement or need statement that we have clear goals and objectives, that one feeds into the other and they create the basis. And it also then speaks to what your evaluation plan is. How can you tell that we are closer to fulfilling that need? The elements of a good need statement, it should be clear and condensed into one sentence. Many of you have probably heard you want to make something into what's referred to as a Tarzan statement. What can you tell somebody on the elevator about what your project is? I see you're stressed out. Have you been working on something? Yes, I'm writing a grant about. You don't want to take up a half an hour of their time. Can you distill it so that they can understand what it is? Your needs statement in full usually is going to be at least one page, and you want to make sure that that full needs statement can be a blend of both data and narrative. You want to make sure that you don't pack it with so much data that people lose track of where they are, but you also want to make sure that you don't have so many anecdotal vignettes that they also lose track of what it is and becomes a personnel thing. You also want to make sure that you answer who, what, when, or who, what, and where. The when may not be as important in the needs statement, but the when is important when you're looking at your statistics. You want to make sure that your data is up to date and is from sources that are reliable. I always say that, if you're writing to NSF, you don't want to use WikiLeaks as your source. So I have a brief exercise based on kind of what my chat has been so far. I have a needs statement here for you to read, and how do you think that this may be improved? And Lisa will give us the survey in just a second. I'm going to give you a minute here to read through.
Okay.
And this, thank you all, because this is the first time I've done a webinar like this, so this is also a learning experience, and I would appreciate feedback.
Okay, I see responses coming in. Just a few more seconds here. The question is, how can this need or problem statement be strengthened?
I can no longer see the chat box, so if anybody wants me to go back to with the needs statement, just let Lisa know and she can let me know.
You could go ahead and click back to it, because Fern is asking, can you put up the slide again? Yep.
Oh, and it's nice that you can move the poll so you can read it. Very good.
About 9 people responded so far. Any more responses from folks? Give it your best guess. Okay, so we got another response. I'll go ahead and end the poll. And let's see, what did people think?
Okay, good. What I was trying to point out is that in just thinking about what I talked about having strong needs statement are, this in itself isn't too bad, but it could be improved with a little bit of statistics or clarification on really what are they talking about. You're not sure what direction they're going to go in from this brief statement. You anticipate that it's going to be something that's going to be helping young women, but you really don't have much to go on from that. And so it does need a little bit of clarification, and a statistic would significantly help. Historically, what do they mean? Back to the Middle Ages? You always have to wonder, and you want to make sure that your needs statement is going to pass that sniff test. One of the ways that I like to do that, just like I shared here, is if you are working on a needs statement, you want to indicate or have somebody read it who does not know anything about the project. And if they understand what it means, then it'll pass any other individual who's going to be looking at it at a committee. So the next part is, once you get your needs statement developed, and it can be the one sentence or your full needs statement that may be one full page, you want to take a look then at what your goals and objectives are going to be. In my long history in higher education, we've often called these goals and objections because sometimes they're just kind of, you wonder why you're doing them. For a grant, though, your goals and objectives are going to set that table of what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be looking at setting up your evaluation and your measurements on how you can deem your project successful. A lot of times people think goals are where all of the data and the measurements are, but oftentimes for a grant, your goals are going to be more generalized statements. So a good goal statement is going to include the intended effect or outcome of the project. Not necessarily in a statistical way, but in a way that we are going to do something. So we're going to decrease teen pregnancies in Rochester, New York. You want to make sure that the identified need is part of the goal. You want to make sure that the target population is going to be included. So the goal statement that I just said is teen pregnancies, so it would be teenagers. All goals should start with to. Starting a goal with the words to shows intent, and it shows that there's going to be action. You intend to do something. You want to make changes. And by starting that off, you're already starting their mindset of action, and that your goals are not going to be static. Some examples of good goal statements are to reduce unemployment among teens in New York State, to improve graduation rates for high school seniors, to prevent crime in the city of Boston. A common mistake when you're creating goals is that you are specifying a process rather than an outcome. And so some examples of process goals are to make camperships available, to deliver hours of counseling, to shelter homeless, to increase enrollment. Those kinds of things are more of a process goal, where an outcome goal will get you to a finality. And remember, a grant has an end date, so it will get you to a finality. The outcome goal contains three components of a goal here: the proposed effects, the identified need, and the target population. Your target population can be specified even more. In this case, it says among inner city disadvantaged youth. If you want to make it specific to a city, so I use Boston above, to increase outdoor self-sufficiency among Boston disadvantaged youth, city of Boston disadvantaged youth. That way you can make it more your own, but you also want to remember that your goals are going to be more overreaching. Your objectives. Goals and objectives go hand in hand. Typically, if you have one goal, you want to have a minimum of 2 objectives for each of those goals. Your objectives are the hands-on pieces of it, that where you get your statistics in. So they should be measurable. How much are you going to do? You're going to have them attained within the time frame of the project. You don't want to write a grant that is, unless it is a seed grant, you don't want to have something that's going to go on forever when you're writing your application. Your measurable objectives within the time frame, within your objectives, as long as they're within the time frame of the project, they can be shorter. You can have some goals and objectives. If you've got a 5-year grant, you should show something that you're going to have progress among those 5 years, not all of them on the 5th year. You want to make sure that all of them are related back to the need, and that, again, you're going to identify your target population. Sometimes it's going to seem like you are saying the same thing over and over and over again about your target population, but you want to make sure that they know who you're serving. So a well-written goal related to an objective. So the goal is to increase the number of teen mothers with high school diplomas in Monroe County. And this has all of the pieces that we'll be looking for. The objective is then to reduce by 10% the school dropout rate of teen mothers in the city of Rochester by providing case management services. A lot of times you're going to work, and even if you're working with someone else, you're going to find that they think the objective is the goal. And that's something that I work with a lot of faculty and staff on, differentiating between the two of those. Again, this objective meets the need, related, attainable, identifies the target population. It's measurable and specifies a time frame. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So I have a goal and objective exercise, again, similar to the one that we had before. Using the survey tool, can you comment on how, if at all, this goal, it says these, but it's only this goal, can be improved?
So I did launch the poll, and hopefully folks are able to move that poll around, however it launched on their screen. It's just a window. If you could drag that so you can make sure to read the exercise as well. How can this goal be improved? I do see responses coming in. Just a few people have responded so far. Others, I'm sure, are still reading.
For all of you that are multitasking, this is our way of re-engaging you.
Great. Okay, we have the majority of people have already voted, so I'm going to go ahead and end that polling and share the results.
Excellent. I'm glad to see that a lot of people thought that this is a process goal. It is. It doesn't have any specifics that could be taken out and put anywhere. It needs a little bit more information, and to make it an outcome goal, we would be able to make some changes. This is actually something that I worked with a faculty member on, and did get a little bit of resistance because he said, well, it's perfectly fine, they know what I mean. And you never want to get into a situation where people think that because your reviewers may be within your profession, that they know what you mean. And we'll talk a little bit about reviewers toward the end of the presentation, but when your application goes in for review and their review committees are made up of people across the United States, they may not know what's going on in your city, your town, your college. You can say that certain trends are happening, and if they're not experiencing it, they don't know for sure what you're saying is true, or that this is really something that is factual. And so you want to make sure that you're going to be very clear in your goal and objective of how it can work. So I want to talk a little bit about, we think about having our strong needs statements, our goals and objectives that are going to address what those are. And now I want to start looking for funding. People ask me, well, can you help me find funding now without developing my goals and objectives? And yes, we can begin it, but we really like to do it when we have a needs statement very clearly laid out so we know we can make the best match. So you want to make sure that you find the type of funding that's going to be the right fit. Just because the National Science Foundation funds science projects and research, it doesn't mean that that's going to be the best match for your project. There's a lot of things that go into looking at what will make the right fit. I often say, and I heard this at a presentation early in my career, that grantsmanship is fantasy fulfillment. You have a fantasy of what you want to see, and funders have a fantasy of what they want to see. The perfect match is when those two fantasies overlap, or your two dreams overlap. How can you make sure that you are meeting those or melding those two ideas or desires? So you can use your needs statement and goals and objectives to search for funding. One of the biggest places that most people go is to grants.gov, and I put a link on here. So hopefully this is working. And you see the grants.gov
Yes.
site?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Yay, it worked. I tried something different. Grants.gov, if you're not familiar with it, and I didn't put this in as a survey question of how many people were familiar with it, you can use, it has a really good search feature. And when you click on search grants, usually what it does is it comes up with everything that has been posted from the most recent. It goes on for pages and pages and pages. The nice thing about using grants.gov is it has all of the federal grant application materials for both current grants that are being offered, but also archived grants. So if it's something that's not being offered right now, is it something that may be offered in the future? National Science Foundation does a lot of cyclical grants where they will have an RFP or a solicitation that goes out, and that solicitation will have on it, it's going to be offered on November 16th in 2017, and for the next 5 years on the same date. And so you can plan, if you're looking at that and finding your funding by having your needs statement ready, is this something that's going to be offered next year? I'm going to have time to put it together. Department of Education does that also, so you can find some of those that are cyclical. You can use old ones to determine kind of what you want to find for the future. Their search site has keywords. If you know the opportunity number or the CFDA number, you can do searches that way. You can see also down on the side here, it tells you what types of funding is available. So you have the funding instrument type, cooperative agreements, which is more of a contract than a grant, grants themselves, others, and procurement contracts. If we want just grants, you click on grants and it already brings your matching results down to 1,727 matching results that are all grants. You can then look at here, the next one for eligibility. All of us are in education, so we know that we're not looking at individual. We're not a private institution. We're a public state-controlled institution of higher education, so we can pick that out. We've just dropped another 700 applications in our search, so we're narrowing it down a little bit. Then we have different kinds of categories. What kinds of things do we want to do? We're in education, so we're going to bring it down that far. If you know from your needs statement what your keywords are going to be, you can put it up there in addition to clicking these boxes, and that brings it into a lot more focus. And we see Department of Education, we've brought it down from 1,700 different types of applications to review to just 10, and we can look at them. One of the things you want to think about when you're looking at reviewing an RFP, or but I do this when I'm in person, I ask, does everybody know what an RFP is? An RFP is a request for proposals. Some different agencies call them solicitations, and you may also hear that they're a request for agreements. Any of those, I'll talk about the same kind of thing, and it's the basic offer of the grant money. I want to go over a little bit about how to look at some of these, and let's see, Institutes of Education Sciences. Let's see what that has. So when we look at this, when you're working in grants.gov, this has your basic information that you'll want. It has the tabs across the front here is the synopsis, and oftentimes instead of going into the application package itself, the synopsis will give you the information to find out if what you want to do meets with what the, in this case, Department of Education wants to do. You can see that it has the grants notice here, it has the opportunity number, the type of grant it is, it gives you what the dates are. So it was posted in May. Its closing date for applications is September 21st, 2017. That's a nice long time to be able to see what they want. The package was actually available July 13th, and again reiterates that it's due September 21st. The archive date is when the application information that we're looking at now will go into archive, so it remains open even after the closure of the time when they accept grants. Under eligibility, this is what you're going to look for to make sure your organization is eligible. Nonprofits or 501c3s. Again, I could probably do a survey, but most colleges, except for some of the community colleges, have a sponsored research or a research foundation office. The Research Foundation for CEANY works with us and becomes the nonprofit arm for grantsmanship. Here at Brockport, all of our grants go through the Research Foundation. When I was at MCC, we didn't have a research foundation, so we used our MCC Foundation nonprofit status, and that became acceptable. Most community colleges, when they ask for information, oftentimes I found that they try and submit information on their tax exempt statement, which is different than being a nonprofit. So you want to make sure that you look at both of those. We'll see here for eligible applicants, it's open to private institutions for higher learning. And down here, the second from the end is the public and state-controlled institutions for higher education. So we would be eligible for this. It gives you the description here of what they want, and it's long and involved, but not as long and involved as the application is going to be in itself. They're telling you to make sure you look at the Federal Register when it comes out, and the Department of Education is one of those that uses that. It gives you then links, and the most important other information here is at the bottom. Oftentimes people don't want to use the grantor contact information because they think that they're going to be quote unquote bothering the project staff. The project staff that are identified here related to these different projects are open to taking your questions. One of the things that I have found to be particularly helpful in my experience is sending an email to them and asking them when it would be a good time to talk. And you can have a list of questions available so that you make your talk worthwhile. You don't want to call them every day with a different question. That does become overkill. But I have found them more than open to answering questions that are related to what my project may be and how it may relate to what they're looking for in funding. In the version history, it will just tell you on which version this is. Oftentimes, you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date one. They do make changes. So don't think just because you grabbed it off of the site at one time that that's it. They have related documents, so you can find what those are. And when you get in to look at what the full package is, you can look at a preview or to apply itself within grants.gov. Now, if you're looking at grants.gov to where you're going to apply through that portal, they're changing over and making it a new kind of area called Workspace. And so for those of you that have done grants before and gone through grants.gov, make sure you go in and familiarize yourself with that in advance of submitting any new types of grants. It's pretty easy and intuitive. Also, SUNY Research Foundation is developing a portal for us to work through that communicates both with grants.gov and FastLane, and that would make it easier as we're trying to do our applications. We can put it up and multiple people can interact with the application itself. It really will save a lot of time down the road as we are looking at having more and more project directors, professionals like myself, and budgetary people weigh in on our applications. It will save a lot of time. I am somebody who will go on and look at my workload over the weekend, so if there's something that I can take care of through that portal on the weekend and have the rest of my time free, then I appreciate it rather than worrying about it all week. So this is just kind of a way that you can see what, when you're looking for funding, what kind of things that you can look at to see if you're eligible. I want to make sure I'm going to, there we go. Posted. Okay. The next I wanted to talk about some local philanthropic organizations. We do have within each geographical area, there's usually some foundations that have been created to serve those particular needs. In the Rochester area, we have the Greater Rochester Area Community Foundation, and those foundations are established to support whatever the funder gave the money for. Governmental applications are ones that you're going to find larger money for, but if you have a smaller grant that you want to write, say you have a project where you know that you can get it done for $25,000, you probably don't necessarily need a large governmental grant. It would be kind of overkill, but those local philanthropic organizations or corporate organizations may be where you want to search. You can do a Google search for them, or you can look at, just look for local community philanthropic and put your community geographic area in, and you can find some of that information. Their RFPs are very similar in that they lay out what they want, but they are much less fettered with the information that a governmental application will have. You can usually, with a local philanthropic area organization and or a corporate organization, you're going to find that they are more than willing to take questions. Establishing relationships with them often is helpful because they like to know who you are and what you're doing. Many times they already are familiar with your school, so that they already have either a good feeling or a bad feeling about what you're doing. I often get asked, well, what if my college, what if they say, you're a state-run institution, you have too much money already, I'm paying taxes, why should we give to you? So you want to make sure that you can make your needs statement very strong to address that kind of bias that are sometimes found in philanthropic committees. When looking at the philanthropic organizations, you're going to find that they are very much driven by what their mission is, and they don't oftentimes want to deviate for that. So if their information says that they want to fund people within a certain age frame, so they want to serve young adults, and you think that young adults may be up to 25 or 26, but maybe they see young adults ending at 18. Don't try and sneak anybody in between 18 and 25. They don't want to fund that. You want to make sure that you're going to match what you want to do with with the monies that they want to give. The benefits of working with local philanthropic organizations is that relationship building. And again, I really advise that you reach out to those organizations and find out what they want to give and have those discussions in advance. For eligibility, is it going to be your college? Is it going to be your foundation? Is it going to be the research foundation? What departments are you going to work with? Are you working within most other departments within your college? A lot of times, the local philanthropic or governmental or non-governmental funding, so even a corporate foundation, they have no idea and they don't understand how colleges are broken into departments. They think we're working with Brockport, so that they think they're working with all of Brockport. So are you working with different departments within your organization? You want to be specific on what they are and explain them when you're looking at it. Are you working with students? Are students going to become employed through this? Are students going to be engaged? Are you going to have researchers? What are the funding amounts? Thinking about what your budget is going to be. And I know that a lot of people, when they're going into grants, they think, the budget is very intimidating. But you want to make sure that you think about what kind of money do you need. Are you going to need $500,000 and then go and write a grant for only $50,000? Your project isn't going to work if you're trying to fit it into a funder. So you want to make sure that your funding amounts are going to be what the funder is going to give. Does the funder have any special requirements? And you want to make sure that you look at those in advance. All of the colleges have DUNS numbers, and when it's a Dun and Bradstreet number that identifies each school, you want to make sure that those kinds of requirements, if you don't have them, New York State has, all New York State grants go through Grants Gateway. You can do a similar search to what I showed you in grants.gov for Grants Gateway. They have special requirements. You have to make sure that your document vaults are up to date. So you want to make sure those things are done in advance of even beginning to write your grant application. You want to think about how those things are going to meet your project to match what the funder wants to fund. You want to make sure you learn to read the RFP. You want to know what you're looking for. So that list that I just had, and this is going to be archived so you can pull that up in the future. You want to make sure that you check all of those things off when you're looking for at the RFP. You want to make sure that the key dates are there. Is a letter of intent need to be filled out first? A letter of intent, most people think it's a traditional letter, or the old style. Oftentimes now it's an electronic form that you need to complete, and basically what they want to know is what kinds of projects do we have coming, how much are they going to be asking for, so you'll need kind of an idea of what you're going to ask for money, and what your organization is. So a little bit of background information of who you are as an institution, a little bit about what you want to do, so your needs statement that you've worked on comes in handy right there, and then they are able to take that and develop who they're going to have for their review committee. Are they going to have, through their letters of intent, 500 applications or 50 or 10? They can then determine how many people they need to have look at them. Oftentimes within governmental, in both state and federal government, they pull people who have expertise in the area to be their reviewers. Philanthropic and corporate organizations typically have either board members or community volunteers serve on their review committees. So you want to make sure that all of your narrative reads to those different kinds of audiences. You don't want to talk up to or down to anybody. Do they require matching funds or in-kind? Matching funds and in-kind are, and I say we'll define later, later is now. Matching funds and in-kind are what are the things that the institution are going to bring to be part of the project. Oftentimes, people think that's indirect. Indirect are not matching or in-kind funds. Matching and in-kind, I often say, are what kinds of things do you have to have from the institution to make sure your project can be successful? As an example, if you're going to offer a new counseling program, by saying your match is going to be the office on which the counselor is going to sit, that's more of what the indirect covers. And in-kinds may be the computer system that you're going to give them, because you'll have to buy a new one for that individual. If you're not asking for those funds in the grant, that can become a match or in-kind. Match and in-kind can also be staff salaries of people who are going to be working on the project but not compensated for that work. It's something that is going to become part of what their job is. That can become part of the match. You want to make sure as you're developing your project and you're looking at it in advance that you understand what that may be so you can start working on it early enough. What kind of funding is available and what's the total amount the funder has to offer? Is there a pre-award, is there a per award amount noted? Now, per award amount is, you'll find this often in governmental, both state and federal, that they'll say they have, you'll get a notice sometimes that the Department of Defense has $75 million available, or $75 billion available for TSA screening training. That's what they have available in total. The per award amount is how much each of your applications can be for the max. I've seen people get confused on what those two things are. What's the total amount the funder has to offer and what's the per award amount? If it's not noted, that becomes one of the questions that you can ask when you contact the organization's contact person or agency rep. And you want to make sure what's going to be covered and what's not going to be covered. If you need to have certain things covered, and travel is a big one, a lot of times the governmental, both state and federal, will cover travel, But I am finding more and more local philanthropic and corporate philanthropic organizations don't want to cover travel. They feel like sometimes these things become vacations for people. Oh, you want to go do a presentation. They don't understand sometimes that us doing presentations is part of what our professional development is made to be, what we're doing, and part of the purpose of sharing some of what our research is. So you want to make the case if it is allowed, and if it's not allowed, how is that going to be covered? It can then become an in-kind or a match to the project. So I see I've got about 9 minutes. I finished a little more quickly than I anticipated. If you have specific questions and you want to contact me, I've got my contact information here. I am going on vacation, so don't call me in the next week and a half. There's going to be a half-day pre-conference workshop at the November conference, and I'm going to be going more in depth on budgeting. We'll be doing a lot of hands-on. We'll be looking at timelines and how you create them, how your methods tie back to goals and objectives. We'll be doing a lot of hands-on kinds of things at that workshop, and you've already got a leg up by participating in this workshop. And each of your campuses have a grants professional that you should reach out to if you've got an idea. I have a terrific person that I'm working with that now has been assigned to do searches for grants. So it takes kind of that search process off of your shoulders, but you and that person will be working as a team. Sometimes your offices may have that. If your grants office knows what you're looking for, they can better serve your needs and help you get better down the road. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Let me look in the chat area here. If anyone has questions, go ahead and type them in there. I'm just arrowing, kind of scrolling back up through the chat. Karen had a question. She said, why do they leave grants up after they have closed? Let's be on the grants.
Often,
go ahead. Hello?
leave an application even though it had a close date. It may have to stay open because of specific things that may have happened technology-wise. Also, they leave them open so that anybody who's been asked to serve on one of the committees can go back and review and see if this is something that they really want to serve on the committee for. And lastly, they leave them open so that an applicant can go back and look at it if a question is asked. I find with the National Institute of Health, they'll come back, they'll accept your application on the application date, you got it in on time, but they may come back and ask questions. And so you can have that application material open so you can review, you can go back and review that to answer their questions within that scope. I hope that answered that.
Great. Any other questions for Tish? I just got a no, but thanks.
And again, I said this is the first time I've done it in this format. I practiced it in advance and it went a little bit longer, so my apologies for finishing early.
No, I think that's just fine, Tish. I think it gives people a chance to reflect, finish up their lunch if they, they haven't been eating during the webinar. I am going to put a link in the chat area for folks to go ahead and click on, and that'll give us some feedback about today's webinar. It'll also help us in planning future ones. So I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat. If people could go ahead and click on that. Also, Karen put a helpful link in the chat. about the conference. So registration is going to be opening very soon.
So this is Karen, and I would just like to thank Tish for an outstanding webinar, really information-packed, Tish, and it was wonderful for you to show us that government site. Those can be a little overwhelming. And again, to everyone, if you want to help justify to your hiring manager or supervisor why you should be going to the conference, I would definitely tout the pre-conference workshop, because you will learn how to get money for your organization.
Yes, and one other thing, if for anybody that's online also, if you have an idea for a grant and you want to bring it to the conference for me to review with you, I'm more than open to doing that. And then we can look at how we can, as I'm doing my presentation, bring those kinds of things in, and you can ask questions as we're moving forward about your specific project.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
If there's no more questions, on behalf of CEANY Professional Development Committee and CEANY in general, thank you very much, Tish, and as always, Lisa Raposo at CPD, who is our wizard behind the curtain and makes these webinars possible. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.